step 5. The 5th step, which is we take our 4th step and we sit down with our sponsor and we read the 4th step. Very simple step, actually. Not complicated. In the big book, it says that there are a great many promises of relief and being at peace and ease with our Creator, and having a spiritual experience, and feeling that for the first time the drink problem is being removed. And my experience, and I've heard a lot of other people in SA share that they didn't have this great shift on step 5. It was kind of, at least for me, very anticlimactic. Like I finished and it was like, am I done? Yeah, I was waiting for like the thunder, the lightning, and the big book's version of it. And I've thought about it over the years. And here's what I've come up with. I feel like when I listen to AA people talk about step 5, they are describing a lot of what I felt on step 1. And I feel like there's a very important thing that we do in SA that's different, which is a big chunk of our inventory we do on step 1, where we write out, at least most people in SA that I understand I did, I wrote out my entire sexual history, and I got honest with where I've been and what I've done, at least when it comes to lust. And not only do I share it with my sponsor, I shared it with the whole group, which a lot of people do. That's a scary thing. And the benefit for me of that was a lot of those 5th step promises that the big book talks about. In AA, they don't need to do that. Like, what are they going to sit and be like, okay, this is really hard, but I got to tell you, like in my drinking story, one of the things I always did if I was going to an occasion is the first thing I did when I sat down before I said hello to anyone is I would have a Boilermaker, which means I would take a shot of whiskey, and I would take a glass of beer, and I would drop the whiskey into the beer, and then I would quickly drink it before it can mix. And what that did for me was it allowed me to be at perfect ease and peace with the world, so that now I could turn to the person next to me and say hello. And it was just kind of like a primer for me to be able to participate socially with other people. So if I'm sitting at an AA meeting like this one and I want to tell you about my Boilermaker, I'm not turning colors and dying of embarrassment. It's like, so what? Big deal. And then the next guy's like, all right, I never told anyone this, but when no one was looking, I used to drink cognac. Oh. It's like, I understand that AAs also have shame about the things they did when they were drunk, but the alcohol itself is not an inherently shameful thing. But when we come here to SA, it's like I don't want to tell people that I put on women's underwear and masturbated rolling around in a bathtub like I was having sex with someone and there was no one there but me. And like, I could say it now because I've said it so many times. You know how hard that was for me to admit for the first time to the group that I did that? I was so scared to tell the truth about that I thought about rather leaving SA than telling that story. Because I thought for sure that was going to be something that gets me kicked out of here, that like, you're all respectable sexaholics, and I'm just a pig, It's being recorded, so I'm not going to say some of the other things. But offline, see me later. I'm a sexaholic, and my acting out is not pretty, and it's not cool, and it's not fancy. It's pathetic, and it's disgusting, and it makes no sense. So when I got honest about that, and then the group shared with their identification, I had a lot of the 5th step promises. I feel like we do a big chunk of the scary part of step 5 on step 1. That's just an SA thing that I think is unique for us. But in terms of the practice of step 5, that's something that I find has to continue. One of the reasons why I'm able to share that story freely with you is because I was taught to get honest at meetings. Tell the truth. Roy writes in the White Book, lead with our weakness. See, even if I want to carry the message, it's okay to start my first 20 seconds or 30 seconds of a share. Just get honest with something, or to call someone up and tell them myself, here's something I'm struggling with. Here's something that's going on in my life. And Roy writes in the 18-wheeler in the back of the white book about the athlete's foot of the soul, that lust loves the dark. It wants to just keep everything. We're only as sick as our secrets. And step 5 is about breaking out of that. It's not enough to be honest with myself and God. I need myself, God, and another human being. And all 3 of those things are important. First of all, to be honest with myself. Like, this is true. Like, let's stop bullshitting around. This is what's happening in my life. These are the fears I have. This is the lust in my life. Here are the resentments I have. And number 2, to be, the God thing is also important for me. I could face God, and I could be honest with God, and God isn't going to strike me dead. Someone's like, I'm angry at God, but I don't want to tell God that. I was like, you don't think he knows? Yes, for me to be able to say, God, fuck you, was very important, because I was saying it anyway with the way I was living and the way I was behaving, and in alternate ways. Let's just get honest. A good relationship is, we're supposed to be able to talk about stuff. So let me and God be able to talk about it. And then another human being, to be able to be honest with what's going on, is something that is a crucial part of the continuing inventory that we do even after we're done our steps. Whether you're someone that goes back and starts your steps over, or whether you live in 10, 11, and 12, the big book is very clear. We continue to look for our character defects and our lust, and when these crop up, we ask God to remove it. There's us, there's God, and we share it with someone immediately, and there's another human being. It's really the continuing practice of step 5 over and over and over and over again. Because all by myself, I could fool myself into sick living, just like I did before program. And thank God there are people in the program who are willing to respect me enough to call me out on bullshit. And if you don't have people in your life who are calling you out on bullshit, then number 1, ask yourself if you're being honest enough, and ask yourself if you're sharing it with the right people. Yes, I also want people in my life to give me a hug and say you're doing great. But every so often, you need someone that's like, hey, what's with you? Get with it. And there's people in this room now who have been willing to do that for me, and I appreciate it. They're like, I hope you don't mind that I'm telling you that. Don't mind. That's why I'm here. I'm part of a fellowship. We're here shoulder to shoulder to help each other, and that's one of the beautiful parts of step 5. So I'll stop it here. We have 15 minutes for questions, and then we'll close out the meeting. Thanks for letting me share.
Directly on something you said, but on step 4. I'm finding that I get very angry with my kids. Again, I lose my temper. And the way I've understood is like it's 4, 5, 6, 7. It's like one continual process. That step 4, then you find the problem, and then you work on it in 6 and 7. And it didn't come up in 4 and 5. It's just that character defect that I have.
So what's the question?
Just that it's supposed to come up in step 4.
So the 4th step question is, I have kids, and I get angry at my kids, but on my inventory, my kids aren't on there. It's not like I'm resentful at my kids. My kids are on my inventory. I think the people I love the most better be on my inventory, or it's not. I don't think it's an honest inventory. My mother, my father, my wife, my son, my daughter, my brothers, my sisters, these people must be on my inventory. It can't be. It can't be that I love someone and don't, because if I'm on the highway and somebody throws their hands up at me as they rip around me, so it might hurt my feelings, but it's very low on the importance list. That person is meaningless in my life. If my wife acts that way, it feels much more hurtful. So my kids have character defects, and those character defects get in my way. I have a son who's 4 years old, and when he's angry, he yells at me that I'm gonna go to jail. You're gonna go to jail. And then he even has a rhyme he does. How does it go? I don't remember how it goes. And won't you know, when he yells at me, my body shuts down. It's a terrifying thing. I talk about fear. So when I say to him, like, this is what's going to happen next, now you're going to go to sleep, and he yells at me, you're not in charge, I resent him for that. Now, it might take a lot of courage to admit that, because it sounds like I'm a petty child. Like, I'm a 39-year-old father, and he's a 4-year-old kid who's just angry that I'm making him go to sleep. But when he yells at me, it hurts my feelings. And when he says, I'm going to go to jail, what I want to do is pick him up by his shirt and put him up against the wall and say, let me tell you something. I am not to be spoken to that way. This is what's going on in my head. Right now, as I'm saying it, I'm thinking, yeah, put him in his place, teach him. If he doesn't learn, and this is, by the way, what I think the book meant when it said that it sets into motion trains of circumstances, have we not ourselves gotten the ball rolling, is that if I do behave that way, I'm not behaving that way because it's my responsibility as a father to teach my kid how to be respectful. I'm behaving that way because I'm scared that if I don't put him in his place at 4, this is going to turn into a big problem. And when he's 14, we're going to be butting heads. And if I'm really honest, when he's 34, he's going to be telling a therapist one day about his horrible father, and that's a big no-no. I am not ever going to be the subject of my kids' therapy sessions. I'm setting into motion trains of circumstances because I'm afraid. Because if I say to God, hey God, please direct my thinking, please demonstrate through me what you can do. Please remove my fear, and please, what's the last part? Show me what you would have me be. God has never shown me what he would have me be by picking my kids up and putting them up against the wall. My principal in school, when I was in 7th grade, picked me up by my shirt and put me up against the wall. And for me to do that to my kids, that was an example of a limitation. It's a limitation. If it's ever the right thing to do for someone else, maybe, but not for me. So regardless of if it does actually show up on my written 4th step or not, it's gonna look back and say, am I being honest about my kids' character defects? Why am I not writing those things in my 4th step? And why are they not showing up on my fears inventory? And for sure, in my 6th and 7th step, I am making decisions as a parent and as a husband based on fear. Why do I get so mad at my wife when I think she's mistreating my kids? Is it because I love my kids so much? Or is it because there are things that happened in my life, the way I was treated as a kid, that wake up when my wife is trying to do homework with the kids, and I can't handle it, and the solution becomes shut her up. I didn't know all that when I was telling her you're calling her abusive and all these things. No, what she was doing was teaching math to my daughter. That's what she was doing. Now, when people taught math to me, that was a traumatic experience. So I get all mixed up. And second of all, it's fear. I'm scared that if she does math with the kids her way, then those kids are going to grow up, they're going to be messed up, and here we go again, them talking about their father who saw her behave that way and he didn't stop them. And no kid of mine is going to sit in a therapist's office at 30 years old and tell the therapist that their father just stood there and did nothing. So I made decisions based on fear. Those are my 6 and 7 things, but I don't learn those things if I'm not talking about them.
The workshop on the prayer that you mentioned about the fear inventory. Can you speak a little bit about the written inventory? Is it just listing the fears? Is there any help? How you do? What you guys say?
The question was about my written fears inventory, which I will admit, looking back at the first 4th step I did, I'm not very enamored with the fears inventory that I did. But for sure, and I said this last week, your first time through your 4th step, for sure, and maybe after that, but for sure your first time, if you don't have a sponsor, get a sponsor. If you're not up to step 4, get to step 4. And if you're up to step 4, do what your sponsor walks you through, because your sponsor is someone who's been through the 4th step and you haven't. So just the first time through, just get the work done. Just kind of get a feel for it. My first 4th step was very simple. 2 columns was, what are my fears and why do I have these fears? And nobody helped me understand the question of why do I have these fears. What I thought at the time was, why do I have these fears? And it was helpful, actually. I answered, why do I have these fears? Like, for example, why do I have the fears of, why am I scared of the way my wife does homework with my kids? Because when I was a kid, homework was a traumatic experience, and I was terrible at it, and I couldn't follow it, and I got yelled at for it, and I got criticized for it, and people were impatient with me, and there's some truth to that. Whenever we're disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with us. For me, a lot of that is stuff that I went through in my life that wakes up in my home life. My favorite way was taking page 68, what we just read, and just going sentence by sentence and just writing down what it says to write down. List my fears. And then it says, we asked ourselves why we had these fears. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. So, the last time that I did it with the big book, I just asked myself, where's self-reliance here? Which is not a book I've seen, which is not a question I've seen really on the checklist sheets, but maybe it's on some of them, not the ones I had. And sometimes I have the answer, and sometimes I don't, and sometimes I call someone and say, "Hey, where's self-reliance here?" Self-reliance was good as far as it went, and then I have to ask myself, am I trusting on God here? And what would it look like if I moved this fear over to God reliance instead of self-reliance? And would it solve the fear problem? And to do the prayer. To me it's a foolproof way of going through fears, whether you're on step 4 or not, whether you're on step 1 or not.
Morning. It being that you had mentioned that we do a lot of the sexual harm done to others in step 1, how important is that in step 4? Where they did the fears and the resentment inventory. How important is the sexual harm inventory in step 4?
So I was hoping no one would pick up on the fact that I skipped the sexual inventory today, and it's probably the weakest part of my 4th step. It was my sexual conduct, sexual harm, sexual ideal list, and I've done it a few different ways, and I've never really finished it with a sense of like I feel like this is complete for me. I'm a sexaholic, so my first step was definitely thorough. Pages and pages of typed, inventory of my sexual history. But more and more, I'm believing that the sexual inventory on step 4 is about formulating a sexual ideal. And I don't know if sexual is even the right word. A sex ideal. In other words, how I interact with my wife, how I interact with women, how I think about romance, love, intimacy, sex is just part of it, and the book says that we're formulating a spiritual way of living in our sex life and in our romantic life and in our. To me, it's part of the great dilemma of the sexaholic. So it's literally what we do here, but it also has some good advice there in the big book about praying for the right ideal and being willing to work towards it, which is different than being perfect at it. And it seems from the big book like Bill doesn't believe anyone's going to be perfect at it, and I can't prove him wrong yet. And I think as recovering sexaholics, we actually are in a position where we can actually be more sober in our sex life than non-sexaholics. At least when I listen to non-sexaholic recovery speakers, some of those people are really screwed up when it comes to their romantic life. And I think, well, I'm judging someone who's not a sexaholic, so he's just working through character defects. We don't have a choice. We have to work on that.
That's like the core of SA sobriety. So I guess the beautiful hope in all of this, just in closing, is that if we work this program, we're honest about who we are, we're thorough about our inventory, we're honest about sharing it, that we really can live an exceptional life that what does it say? Rockets us into the fourth dimension of living, even compared to other recovery people. Like, we can have something really, really, really special. So thanks for letting me share, guys. I'll see you next week.